let's mention the last two sins of the eye before moving on, just as a quick review. Um, it's forbidden. It's among the sins of the eye to look down on a Muslim. So among the sins of the eye is to look at the Muslim with an eye of superiority, like to look down on a Muslim and think that that Muslim is below you or under you or less than you. So to look at them as if they're inferior, either because they're poor or because they have a weak body or the like. And we mentioned something similar to that prohibition when we were talking about the definition of arrogance. However, it was repeated here to show that it is included among the sins of the eye because the case has two aspects. One aspect that is related to the heart, and one aspect that is related to the eye. Because obviously the arrogance stems from the heart, and so, but that look that the person gives another person that they're looking down on and that they look at as inferior, that look itself is a sin. Then it's a sin of the eye to look into the house of another without his permission, or to look at something that he has hidden or kept hidden. Like let's say someone has a secret diary, and he doesn't want anybody to look at it. So it would be forbidden for someone to look at it without their permission. So it is forbidden to look into the house of another without his permission. That is to look at what he would normally hate to be for someone to look at, and he would be harmed, and the people that are inside the house would be harmed. Likewise, looking at something that someone else kept hidden among what he would be harmed by. And that is like looking into a crack in the door or a hole in the door uh, to look at the one that's inside the house or what is around the house. I mean, what the house contains. Among what the owner of the house would get harmed by someone looking at that. And for example, an example of that is like for the person who owns the house, for example, for them to have like their unlawful nakedness exposed, or some of his mahrams are in the house, like his daughter, and likewise his wife. So he wouldn't want someone to look inside of his house and see, let's say, his wife uncovered and his daughter uncovered. So whoever does that, looks into somebody's house, or looks at something that they try to keep hidden, then this is forbidden. So now we move on to the sins of the tongue. So the first one that's mentioned is riba. So among the sins of the tongue is riba, and it is defined as mentioning your Muslim brother with something that he hates in his absence that is true about him. So some people will call this backbiting because obviously he's talking behind his back. Uh, and it can also be called gossip. And pay close attention to the definition because it's if this specific definition is found, then we know that it is ghiba. So that is to mention something true about your Muslim brother in their absence that they do not like mentions about them. Yani. So first thing is something true. So the thing that you're mentioning or the thing that's being mentioned is actually true. They are actually, let's say, overweight, or they are actually messy, or they are actually stingy, or they are actually have a dirty house, or their kids are actually spoiled, or the husband is actually henpecked, or the wife is actually, let's say, rude, or the person is actually rude, or the person actually has a limp, or the person actually has a lazy eye, or the person um, actually, for example, has dirty clothes. The person actually is, let's say, disorganized. The person actually is rude or impolite. So it has to be true about them that that actually is the case. And second thing is that they're Muslim. So if someone says something true about a kafir, someone says something true about a kafir that they don't like in their absence, then this is not forbidden. So if someone, because the thing is that some people they have the desire to talk about other people. It is something like a desire, something like something like a fulfillment of something that they have within themselves, like an urge that they have to talk about another person. So if the person really is addicted to talking about other people and really feels like he has the strong urge to do that, then he should do that, or he if he is going to do that, that he should talk about the non-Muslims. So if he talks about the non-Muslim, he doesn't get get the Muslim who talks about a non-Muslim behind their back. Uh, they don't get a sin. The Muslim doesn't get a sin for that. So the Muslim, if he wants to spend his whole day talking about, for example, for example, they got their house raided and uh, the the FBI is investigating them, and they have hidden cameras all over their house. They filmed people in compromising positions without their consent, and this person has been accused of like sexual assault and raping people and taking people's money. You could you could say all of that about that non-Muslim because in that case, there's no ghiba, there's no backbiting, there's no sinful gossip. So if the person being talked about is a non-Muslim, then it's halal. And the third thing is absence, meaning the thing that's being said is true. It's being said about a Muslim, and it's not in their face. It's not while they're there. There's some people they think, oh, I'll tell them to their face, or like they think that in order for it to be sinful, or in order for it to be gossip, that the aspect of it being behind their back, implying that they won't say it to their face. So when you tell the person, "Oh, this is ghiba," You can't talk about a Muslim like that. They'll say, I'll say it to his face too. Like they're trying to say, like, I'm not scared for them to know that this is what I said. And they think that that might change something, but it doesn't. It's something that is, and it would just be a different sin if you go to a Muslim and you tell him, you're ugly, or your house is dirty, or you have a lazy eye, or you walk with a limp, or you have a speech impediment, you have a lisp. To say those things, whatever it is that the Muslim hates to be said about him, that's true about him, to say it in his face, like to say it to him, that's also a sin because it harms him. So we touched on that in some lessons recently, where we talked about how the Muslim we talked about how the Muslim he has to be very delicate, he has to be very careful with the Muslim, and so we can't harm the Muslim, we can't hurt him. So we have to be careful and delicate with the Muslim, like even with, for example, the way that we talk, even if it's not like hostile or aggressive towards that Muslim, but we have to be delicate and make sure that we're not harming the Muslim. But so for sure, telling a Muslim something that he hates to be said about him to his face, this is something that is for sure going to harm him. So for sure, it would be sinful. So saying it in front of someone, or saying the thing in the person's face doesn't uh hear them from the sin. It's just a different sin, and it wouldn't be technically backbiting. It wouldn't be technically gossip or ghiba, but it would be sinful still. So the next one, let me see here. Hold on. So yeah, this is the prohibition for this is explicitly mentioned in the Quran. Allah Ta'ala revealed, وَلَا يَغْتَبْ بَعْضُكُمْ بَعْضًا أَيُحِبُّ أَحَدُكُمْ أَن يَأْكُلَ لَحْمَ أَخِيهِ مَيْتًا. Which means do not gossip about each other. Would one of you love to eat the dead flesh of his brother? Yani, this is an example and figurative speech, uh, and something so that we can picture what the gossiper, what he achieves by gossiping about the Muslim. And it's emphasized, or styles of emphasis. أيحب أحدكم. This is a rhetorical question. Uh, يعني, meaning none of you would love to eat a corpse, especially the corpse of a dead Muslim. فكرهتموه means like, and you hate it. يعني, none of you, for example, is the question, rhetorical question is, would one of you love to eat his brother's dead flesh? فكرهتموه يعني, for sure none of you would love to eat your brother's dead flesh. And Muslim, and Imam Muslim narrated from the route of Abu Hurairah radiallahu anhu that the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wasallam said, أَتَدَرُونَ مَا الْغِيبَةِ? And they said, Allah and His Messenger knows best. And he said, mentioning your Muslim brother with what is true about him, and then one of the companions they said, "O Messenger of Allah, what about if it's something that is true about him?" Wait, the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam, he asked, "Atadruna ma al-ghiba?" Which means, do you know what ghiba is? And the companions they said, Allah and His Messenger know best. And then the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam said, "Dikruka akhaka bima yakrah," which is mentioning your brother with what he hates. And so one of the companions they said, "O Messenger of Allah, what about if what I said about my brother is really true?" Then the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, "In kana fihi ma taqul faqad اغتبته وإن لم يكن فيه فقد بهته." Which means if what you said about him is really true about him, then you've committed ghibah against him. And if what you said about him is not really true about him, then you have slandered him. Yeah, then you have committed buhtan, which is among the sins of the tongue, which we will cover. But buhtan is a different type of sin because it involves talking something or saying something about a Muslim that is not even true about him. And many people, subhanAllah, they fall into that sin where they, um, for example, they sit around and talk about another Muslim and they make stuff up. Subhanallah. Like they'll say like stuff that's like completely untrue, like people believe it and people think that it's the case. So gossip is to mention your Muslim brother, whether he's alive or dead, uh, to mention something about him that he does not like, to mention something about the Muslim that he does not like if he were to hear about it. If he were to, for example, hear what you said, or if he were to, like, if what you said reached his ears, he would hate that. And he would hate that thing. So, this is the case whether the thing that was said was related to his body, or his lineage, or his clothes, or his house, or his manners. Like to say, so and so is short, or cross-eyed, or his father is a tanner, yani someone who takes the skin of the animal that has not been slaughtered Islamically, like dead cow skin, and he makes leather out of it. Or he says about him, his dad is a shoe shiner. Or he says so and so has bad manners, or so and so has little etiquette, or so and so does not uh he does not acknowledge the rights of people, or so and so doesn't recognize the virtue of others, or so and so sleeps a lot, or so and so eats a lot, or so and so um for example, or so and so thinks highly of themselves, or so and so uh is dirty, or has dirty clothes, or so and so his house is messy, or so and so his child is was not raised properly, or so and so his wife orders him around, or so and so his wife has bad hygiene, and the like of everything that he knows that that person hates to be said about him if it were to reach him. And some of what has been mentioned, it might be mentioned in other than these situations in which the person would hate for that to be mentioned about him. Because, for example, a person's messy house can be mentioned in the context of praising that person for being detached from the worldly matters, or for being content with the little that they have, or for being someone who lives, let's say, a non-luxurious life. So in those cases, it wouldn't be riba. Except, for example, so and so he is so zahid, or so and so he is so detached from the worldly matters. He only has one chair for furniture, for example. So in that case, it would not be haram to say that, because they're saying it in a praising way. They're not saying it in a way where they're like talking about that person in a critical way. So what is the judgment of ghiba? And we said it's haram, but is it an enormous sin or a small sin? So the speech of the scholars have differed about the judgment. So among the scholars are those who considered ghiba an enormous sin, and among those are scholars who consider ghiba a small sin, and without details. And the correct saying is to mention the details. So if the ghiba was about a person of piety, then that ghiba is without a doubt an enormous sin. As for if the ghiba was about someone other than the pious Muslim, we do not say without restriction that it is an enormous sin. Just to make a ghiba about a non-pious Muslim, we don't say that that by itself is an enormous sin. And what has been conveyed or copied about Al-Qurtubi, that he said that it's an enormous sin by consensus, this is not correct. However, the enormous sinner Muslim, if he was talked about, he was gossiped about, if ghiba was done about him to the point of exaggeration, then it becomes an enormous sin. Like if the person he exaggerates in mentioning the bad qualities in other than the for other than the purpose of warning, rather just for entertainment. They mention that person's bad qualities. And based on this, or based on that understanding, is what the hadith إن أربى الربا استطالة الرجل في عرض أخيه المسلم. The hadith is, the meaning of it is that, and that's how this hadith would be interpreted based on those details. The hadith says, indeed, the most usurious riba is for the man to disrespect the honor of his brother Muslim. So this disrespect of the Muslim's honor is an enormous sin, and it's among the most severe enormous sins, because the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam described it as the most usurious riba, meaning that in likening the severity of that type of riba to riba, the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam is saying that doing that type of riba is like doing the most severe riba. So basically, what it's saying is, what does it mean that to disrespecting the honor of the Muslim is an enormous sin, so enormous that it's like the most severe riba. So the scholars they said if it was about a pious Muslim, then it's clear because it's an enormous sin. And if it was about a non-pious Muslim and the person they mentioned that non-pious Muslim, they mentioned their negative qualities so much to the extent that it becomes exaggerated, and they're not warning against him, and they don't have a religious excuse to do that. Then in that case, it's an enormous sin. Otherwise, uh, without reaching that point of exaggeration when talking about the non-pious Muslim, then doing ghiba about them would be a small sin. Was that clear before moving on to other details and other examples? Right. So it is not considered ghiba to say, this hotel is nicer than that hotel. So let's say there was two hotels owned by Muslims, and so you, the person stayed in one hotel, and he stayed in the other hotel, and then he was talking to his friends and saying, "This hotel is better than that hotel, or this hotel is nicer than that hotel." That's not riba. Or to say, for example, his food is more delicious, or to say this one is cleaner than that one, or this store, the clothes that the person has in this store are more beautiful than the other store, or this person, his prices are cheaper than those other prices. So none of that is ghiba. None of that is gossip because the person does not get harmed from that if he were to hear that. However, he doesn't uh like it. And so the mere mentioning of information, the mere the mere mentioning of information, or merely informing, for example, that this hotel is better than that hotel, or these prices are cheaper than those prices, or this food is better than that food, or more delicious than that food, that by itself is not haram, and it's not ghiba. Also, it's not considered ghiba to say, this person, his prices are high, or they are higher than the prices of so and so, or the merchandise of so and so is better than the merchandise of so and so, or the Hajj group, because you know how people they have like Hajj groups and they offer you a package deal and they say like you have a guide and you'll have like someone that will show you how to do the integrals of the Hajj, and you have a private bus and you'll stay at such and such hotel for such and such amount of nights. So you pay like a certain amount of money and the whole trip is like taken care of, and so it's like a what they call like a Hajj group. So to say, for example, the Hajj group of so and so is better than the other Hajj group, or to say, uh, or to say, so and so uh has more knowledge than so and so, because the consideration is given to what the person hates, or what the people with the sound nature hates, to be mentioned about them. Likewise, it is not ghiba, it is not forbidden ghiba to talk about a group of many people that are not um that are not um that they're not restricted. It's not a specific group of people. Rather, it's a large amount of people that cannot be restricted, that cannot be specified. Like to say, for example, such and such tribe has among them uh, such and such characteristic. And while, of course, no one from that tribe is present there in the session to the extent where they would be harmed by that. As for if there was someone among them, someone of that tribe in that session, and this was said in front of him, for example, your tribe is wicked or vile, and of course that's haram because it contains harming him. But if, like, let's say two people were talking uh, on their own, and then they said, for example, such and such a tribe, they're stingy, or they have that characteristic among them, like stinginess is found among them. If they were to say that, uh, that wouldn't be considered forbidden ghiba. And as long as there's nobody from that tribe present there, uh, it wouldn't be haram to say that because it's talking about a tribe of people. It's not talking about a group of people that can be like known. Because the tribe of people could be like the people from now, the people from the past, like people of a certain area. People of that tribe, they could be spread all over the world. However, to say something about a group of people that are known, a specific group of people that are known, uh, something like to dispraise them, then this is something that is ghiba, haram ghiba. Uh, for example, like the people in that room, saying something about them. Um, as for the one who talks about another person behind his back with something that he hates to be mentioned, without mentioning his name and without those that are listening knowing who is being spoken about, then this is not haram because it's anonymous. So they're talking about someone that the people they're not aware who's being talked about. Um, there's an example here. It says, We'll give an example in terms of exaggeration. Like every single time the person is, to say, talking with people, he just goes in on that person. So every single place where he is and he's, meets up with people like in a social setting, he brings up that person and he talks about they're this and that and this and that and this and that and this and that. That's exaggerating. Um, Also, just as it is forbidden to listen to riba, it is forbidden to be quiet on riba while being able to prevent it and leaving out separating from the person who is committing the riba if he does not stop while being able to separate oneself. So basically, if someone is talking riba, then we're obligated to tell them this is haram, don't say it, or this is riba, don't say it, change the subject, let's talk about something else. He has to say something to stop him. And if the person that is doing the riba, they refuse to stop, they say, for example, oh, I will say it to his face, or oh, this is true about them, because obviously they don't like understand the definition of riba. So then, in that case, the person who's there, what he has to do is leave. He has to um go to and he separate himself from the person who is doing the riba, so he can't stay there listening. If he tells the person this is ghiba, change the subject, and the person refuses to change the subject, so then what he does is that he gets up and he leaves, or he goes away from that person. So it's not considered anymore that that person is uh and he's there with him while he's saying. So this is something also very important to understand. Like even and if you're a Muslim that you are actually capable of not talking about other Muslims behind their back and saying things that are negative. If you're actually one of those Muslims that doesn't do that, then also you have to avoid um listening to the ghibah. So you have to actually, if someone talks ghibah around you, you have to stop them, and if they don't stop, you have to separate. Now, is that clear about that case? Before moving on, about some exceptions to the ghibah or some exceptions to the rule. And the exceptions to the rule means that these things that we're going to mention, they still are considered ghibah, but it just wouldn't be sinful because they're excused. The person will be excused. It says here, what about someone who nobody personally knows? Yani, like we mentioned, if the person that is being talked about is anonymous, meaning the people who are listening, they don't know, have any idea who is being talked about, then it's not haram. If it's a Muslim celebrity and the person that is talking about, the person that's mentioning them, they're actually mentioning the name of that Muslim celebrity. So the speech would be about a Muslim in his absence that he hates to be mentioned, so it would be haram to talk about a Muslim celebrity. Like while the people that is listening, the people that are listening, they know that you're talking about that Muslim celebrity. If he's Muslim and you say this guy's playing terrible today, then this would be haram ghiba. This would be ghiba. This would be haram. Because if the person that you're talking about is a Muslim and what you're saying about them is actually true, and they would hate, and if they heard you say this person is playing terrible today, they would hate that, then this is haram. It's haram ghiba. It has to be those three conditions or four conditions: that the person is Muslim, that what's being said about them is true, what's being said about them is in their absence, and that they would hate for it to be mentioned. Uh, I never heard that. Uh, I never heard if you don't know that they're Muslim. I don't have detail about that. Like if they have, I mean, if they have a name like Muhammad or something like that, then just avoid it to be on the safe side. If you're talking about like the United Arab Emirates national soccer team, then for sure I would try to avoid that. If you're talking about like the Kuwaiti national team, then I would avoid that. If you're talking about like the soccer team that's full of like Moroccans and Tunisians, and then definitely I would avoid that. There's a lot of Muslims there. And then it says, what if one says the title of the person but not mention their name, and the person you're talking to doesn't know that person, like saying my cousin or my student or my aunt? Hmm. Uh, hey, that sounds specific because I never heard that. I'll need to ask about that. Then it says, what if I say collectively, not singling someone out, or if they say the team is terrible? Then if there are Muslims amongst them, then this would be haram because we're talking about a specific group of people, a specific group of people that's like quantifiable. We mentioned that if you talk about a group of people that's not quantifiable, that you cannot, like, for example, specify, then it's not haram to say the truth about them or say something true about them that they would hate to be said behind their back. But if the group of people is quantifiable, like in this case, a soccer team, then it would be forbidden if there were Muslims among them. If someone says like my aunt or my cousin, and the person that they're speaking to, they don't know them, that I'm not sure about that because still the person is specific and still like could be that that person that they're talking to might one day meet your aunt or your cousin and be like, oh, that's what they're talking about. Oh, this is the person that, you know, is this and that. So now into the exceptions of ghiba, yani, instances that are actually ghiba, but they are exceptions to the rule and so they are not forbidden. So the author said, and ghiba might be permissible, rather an obligation. And that is like warning from someone who is committing an enormous sin of action or someone who has an innovated deviance that is not blasphemy, and that doesn't reach to the level of blasphemy, and like warning from the merchant, from the business person who cheats in his dealings, or warning the employer, warning him about his employee that is cheating him, or like warning against those that present themselves in positions of giving fatwa or teaching or reciting while they are not qualified, then this is obligatory ghiba. And meaning that even though it is technically considered ghiba, but we're obligated to say it. Now, among the matters that are considered to be ignorance in religious matters is when some people they object to warning against the employee who is cheating his employer. So when you go, for example, and say to the employer, hey, so and so is stealing money out of the register, so and so is scamming people. And it's his business, it's his shop or it's his business, whatever he's selling. So he has to tell the employer about that employee. So some people they say, uh you're cutting off his livelihood, you're harming his livelihood. Why would you do that? Don't do that. They object to it. They tell him, this is, don't do it. So these people, they are giving precedence to caring about the feelings of the slave or the feelings of the person instead of caring about the revealed law. So basically, we don't care how that person feels if we go and tell the employer that this person is cheating him. We don't care if that person gets upset or if that person gets fired and they lose their livelihood because they are stealing, let's say, from the employer. They're betraying him in some sort of way. So obviously, in that type of process, you go to the person first and you tell them, "Look, stop doing this. Tell them, look, this is haram. You can't steal from the employer, etc." And if he doesn't quit and if he doesn't stop doing it, then he goes to the employer and lets him know. So even though that's technically riba, but still, he's obligated to say it. And now among the obligatory riba is to warn against the one who wants to befriend a person in a worldly interaction or in a religious interaction if he knows that the person that he wants to befriend would harm him by befriending him. So being quiet on something like that warning is forbidden. The Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, "Al-mar'u ala dini khalili," meaning that the person is usually upon the habits or the manners of the one who he is a constant companion to. Like the person that he hangs out with often, the person that he's with a lot of the time, he's usually has similar habits, similar characteristics. And so the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam continues saying, فَلْيَنْظُرْ أَحَدُكُمْ مَنْ يُخَالِلْ. And so let each one of you beware and be careful of who you befriend. So the meaning of the hadith is that the person usually they follow in their actions and their character the one who they're constantly with. So it means choose who you take as a companion. So the person that benefits you in your religion, then you should befriend him. And the one who does not benefit you in your religion, rather he harms you, you should stay away from them and do not befriend them. And some of the scholars of Islamic law, they put into the form of poetry the reasons, the six exceptions to ghiba being haram. So this is the meter of Al-Wafir. تظلم واستعن واستفتي حذر وعرف واذكرا فسق المهاجر. So the first one, تظلم, it means whoever, let's say, someone did injustice to that person, and a person was done injustice to, and so he goes and complains about that to the ruler so that the person gets his right from the one who did injustice to him, then it's permissible for him to say, so and so did this to me, and what he's saying about so and so something true behind his back that he would hate to be mentioned. So it technically is ghiba, but it's not haram in that case, an exception. And the one who wants to remove a munkar, an unlawful matter, that someone is doing. So the second one, wasta'in, is referring to he seeks assistance in that by mentioning it to someone else that would help to remove that forbidden thing. This is permissible. So for example, if I know somebody's doing something haram and I want to stop them from doing that haram, but if I tell them to stop, they won't listen to me. But if I go to their mom or their dad or their friend or their uncle or their cousin or the sheikh or the principal or the teacher or someone else, another Muslim, and you tell them, oh, look, so and so is doing such and such thing, so that they can go and talk to him and they can go and advise him and they can go and tell him to stop and they're going to stop. If that other person talks to them, then it's permissible to mention something true about that Muslim behind his back that he hates. And the next one is wastafti. So whoever complains about a Muslim that he had a disagreement about in a certain case, so that he can get the fatwa from a scholar, from a pious scholar, for example, then it's permissible for him to say, for example, so and so yesterday, they took my money and they did this, or so and so yesterday, we had agreed that I was gonna do this and he was gonna pay me that, but then he paid me and he cursed at me or something. Like he's explaining the situation to the scholar so that the scholar can give him a fatwa. So the scholar can give him a judgment and say, for example, so and so is wrong. They owe you this amount of money, or they owe you this apology, etc. So it's technically riba because he's mentioning a Muslim in his absence, something true that he hates to be mentioned. Uh, but in this case, it's not forbidden riba because it's one of the six exceptions. Then hadir, uh, it means to warn against the one who harms the people in their religion or their worldly life. So this is not haram. Rather, it is an obligation to warn against the one that cheats the people in their religion or in the matters of their worldly life when the person is able to warn. So if I know someone, they're a shady business person, for example, they when they make a contract with the person or they say, for example, if you do this, I'll pay you this amount. And then when you do it, like they don't pay or uh they try to give you the runaround. They try to say, yeah, I'm gonna send it or yeah, I'm gonna give it to you, and then they never give it to you and you're waiting and you're waiting and you're waiting. So this harms the person obviously because they did the work and the person said they're gonna give them this or give them that, but then they don't give it to them. And obviously if the person say they don't have it, if they truly don't have it, and if they're poor, so for example, they employed you, they hired you to do a job, uh, but and you thought, or apparently they have money, but then they're not paying you. If the case is that they're not paying you because they don't have money to pay you with, then they're poor, yeah, and they're not falling short as long as they're not being negligent somehow. Uh, so in that case, the person would be excused. But the point is that the person obviously doesn't appear to be poor. The person doesn't is not perceived as poor. So why isn't the person paying you the money that they said they were going to pay you after you, let's say you did the job or whatever you agreed upon? Yeah, like we said, if it's because they're actually poor and they actually can't afford to, or they actually don't have the money, then they're excused. The next one is waharrif, which means the one who wants to identify another person. One second. So basically, the like identifying someone to talk about someone, mentioning something about them that's an identifying factor. Like for example, you're talking to someone, you say, "Hey, you know that brother came to Musalla today. We haven't seen him in a long time. I was so happy." And they're like, "What brother?" And then he says, for example, Abdullah. He mentions his name, Abdullah. He's like, Abdullah? Who's Abdullah? He says, like, Abdullah, he walks with a limp. Uh, he has a cane. He's like, oh yeah, Abdullah. MashaAllah, he hasn't been to Musalla so long. I'm glad that he came, etc. So saying, for example, for the person who has a limp as an identifying factor, then this is, even though it was, let's say, something true said about a Muslim behind his back that he would hate to be mentioned. In this case, because it's to identify, it's not forbidden. Here's another question. What about telling someone's parents their child's sins so they can discipline them? So yeah, this comes back to um like one of the first things we mentioned was time, which is seeking assistance in preventing a forbidden matter. So the thing with sins is if you are witnessing a sin in real time, then your first um your first action is not to go and tell on the person because you're there. So you tell the person, hey, this is haram, don't do this. Fear Allah, think about the hereafter, think about the grave, etc. So if you're witnessing it in real time, then you are the one that's got to say something to try to stop the person from doing it. Then let's say the person stops. So after the person stops, and then like you already told them this is haram, and they listen to you, and they stop doing it. Like in that moment, they stop doing it. Uh, then you assume after that, like let's say you were out somewhere, and then they saw them do something haram. You told them don't do this, is haram, and then they stopped. And then, for example, you each went your separate ways. You went home, and they went home. You assume that they repented, and you assume that they're never going to do it again, and that's it. And then what's your next step? You stay quiet about it. You keep it hidden. You don't mention it. You even like when the next time you see the person, you act as if it never happened because they stopped doing it when you're witnessing it. They stopped doing it when you told them this is haram, etc. If you're Allah, they stopped, and then you went your separate ways. So you assume that person repented. And the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he said, "At-ta'ibu min adh-dhanbi kaman la dhanba lah." The one who repents from a sin is as if he did not commit the sin. So, cause it's done, it's in the past. They stopped doing it. There's absolutely zero reason to bring it up after the fact. There's absolutely zero reason to mention it after the fact. So, but if the person, let's say, they commit the sin in front of you, you tell them this is haram, don't do it, and they don't listen to you, and so you tell them, if you don't stop doing this sin, I'm going to tell your parents. so they can stop you, right? So they can stop you, then this is permissible. You can't. But the person has to be really careful about their intention, about what they want to try to do, because it's really the permissibility about these issues is it comes down to stopping something harmful. And Allah Ta'ala knows best. We'll finish talking about the exceptions, inshallah, in another class, and the next class, inshallah. I think so far we only mentioned five. There's might be like one left. We were at Haddid. Oh, no, we were Arif Musta'in. Anyways, we'll talk about the rest of them. Are there any questions about anything that I mentioned before we conclude? وفيكم. آمين. طيب نهلل لا إله إلا الله اللهم على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم ربي اغفر لي وللمؤمنين والمؤمنات وبارك الله فيكم. السلام عليكم. Uh, you can type it if you have a question. Okay, 1 second. Here we go. Uh, go ahead.
Assalamu alaikum.
Walaikum salam.
Okay, alhamdulillah, you can hear me. Barakallahu feek, Shaykh.
Yes, I can hear you. Go ahead.
Alhamdulillah. Shaykh, about the question about the rules of the exceptions, I'm just not sure. I have a question about in general, I mean, let's say we have a group, several people, 5 people that are related to each other, say maybe they're cousins or siblings, and a group of them, like pick on one of them, like four of them, they go talking about this one other person. So one way or another, and they do this for a long, long, long time. How does that other person go? I mean, telling them, and it just became part of the habit. Maybe they're jealous, maybe for several reasons. So how can that person? I mean, he can go talk to a sheikh or someone, from their group. They say they go to the musalla or mosque or somewhere. To try to get help, but it will be riba, telling them that, they're lying about him, they are doing things, they're going talking behind his back.
Yeah, so he wants to go to another person to help him make his family members stop, like let's say abusing him or hurting him or harming him.
Nah, something like that. They try to.
Yeah, so he
He
can do
wants
that.
to.
He can do that. Yeah, if he goes to like someone that has influence, and those people, they would say, for example, oh, if this person knows about what we're doing, or if someone tells them that we're doing this, and that person, let's say, talks to us, or that person tells us this or that, we're going to be, we don't want that to happen. We don't want to be perceived as those people. So that would motivate them to stop. So then, yeah, they could do that. Because the point is stopping a munkar from happening. Is it clear? Um, Just let me know if that. Okay, go ahead. Because it.
Sorry, I muted
Yeah.
myself and then I couldn't unmute. Yeah, now, what if there's a case, he might feel like they this other person might not even be able to help. It's just maybe their habit, you know. I mean, they just do that
Yeah,
for a
but
long
who
time.
believes
So
that they won't be able to help? The person who is asking them to help doesn't believe that that other person will be able to help. Then in that case, he's just doing it so that he can vent. He can, like, tell somebody else about it, so he can complain, so he can whine about it to someone else. In that case, then he's going to dangerous territory, because now he's talking about Muslims, something true behind their back, for what's the excuse or what's the reason there, and it would just be like almost like for entertainment.
so
Um,
maybe to more like to kind of try.
yeah, to
I
try, he
mean,
can
just
try. So
to
he
let
has
them
to
know that
really,
that
yes, that has to be
he's
his intention. Yes, he's going to them because he feels that if I tell this other person what these other people are doing to me, that person is going to help to stop the munkar.
what if, let's say this thing might continue to happen, but just for this person to know that this is not the case, what is happening to him, it is not true. Just to kind of raise awareness, kind of, if that
So
makes
then you're
sense.
talking about warning now. So you're talking about warning so that this person knows, hey, these people, they do this bad thing. Beware of them. Be careful.
طيب. Barakallahu fiqh. That's good.
Wafikum.
Barakallahu fiqh.
Yeah. So it's either warning or seeking assistance, but not just I want to expose these people.
No, correct.
No.
Barakallahu fiqh.
Wafikum ameen. طيب, inshallah, next week we'll go over more details and hopefully continue on with the sins of the tongue. Assalamu alaikum.